what's up? It's Brian here, and this is the 5th video in the 10-part series on racism that I'm doing. So in this video, I'm going to go into checking yourself, starting here when it comes to your own racist tendencies, assumptions, biases, generalizations, all of that stuff. Because look, in trying to reduce the racism of the world, you really got to start with yourself first and work on that. So I'm going to go into a lot of self-reflection mindsets and just different thinking strategies in this video. And towards the end of the video, I'm going to go over and overlook first sign of potential racist tendencies, so watch out for that. So if you appreciate the messages, like the video. If you got anything to say, constructive feedback, I'm open to that. Comment down below. And just with this whole idea of checking yourself, this goes for any internal character trait. So it's like an analogy is if someone is lying to you or not being authentic to you, you can't really get on them if you're lying to people also and not being authentic, right? If someone's being mean to you, you gotta check yourself first, make sure you're exhibiting kindness to the world. So always look in your own mirror first. You gotta be open-minded to the fact that you're maybe not open-minded in every area of life. And just with this whole self-reflection process too, I wanna encourage you to think deep. So I want you to think back to the part 3 video I did on the racist spectrum. There's a lot of outside of the box thinking in that video in regards to racist tendencies or judgments, right? So a quick example is, say when you're kind to someone, think about your motivations for being kind to someone, or maybe just your thoughts when you encounter someone. Really think deep about that stuff after the fact. So like for kindness, it could come from like bigotry of low expectations. Like you feel you're superior and maybe you feel bad about the other person. You feel like, you know, they kind of need you. You treat them like a child. Right, so like that's obviously a negative way to treat someone, even though that's kindness on the outside. Or it can just be a genuine kindness to someone and you're not coming off condescending. Right, so only you know how you're coming across and only you know kind of your mindsets in regards to kindness and like all character traits through self-reflection. So just really be conscious of that and think about that. And I want to mention too the Raising an Ace Open-Minded video that Merriman and I did. So we talk about the whole concept of open-mindedness in that video, not just in regards to judging people and racism, but there was a quick segment where we mentioned 3 things specifically in regards to racism and biases. So here's that clip. Be conscious of the biases your child has and when they generalize people and the aspects of their life that aren't directly in the household. So really take all that to heart. I mean, parenting is number 1. Like if you're a parent out there, you play a major role in getting your child to be as open-minded as he or she can possibly be. And even if you're not a parent, of course, a lot of those concepts and ideas we talked about in that video just apply to individuals also. And that first point is just on biases. So it's really important to be conscious of your biases. Easier said than accomplished, right? And I want to note that there's a lot of talk on unconscious biases, you know, in the workplace and kind of noticing that. But look, on an individual level, I think it's pretty pointless to reflect on your unconscious biases because they're not going to come to light, right? They're unconscious. I mean, I think over time, you can kind of attack your unconscious biases, but that's kind of indirectly maybe through life experiences or just hearing other people's perspectives. So maybe just expose yourself to different people and just go through life and just thinking from that standpoint, you might attack those at some point. But really start with your conscious biases, number 1. And just a quick exercise with this, I would just close your eyes and just envision different scenarios, right? Like if you walk into an elevator, how do you react to a person of a particular race that gets in the elevator? What is your first thought? If your child is in school and you meet their teacher for the first time, do you have any varying thoughts or judgments depending on the person's race? Maybe when someone says something about a particular topic, do you immediately discredit someone's view because of their race or think differently about them because of their race? Right, so all these things play into biases and just racist tendencies. And another thing to keep in mind is just where do your biases come from, right? So I'm going to pose a question to you. Guess the percentage of quote-unquote bad mindsets or actions or racist tendencies that people do or have in their head that stem from a bad action or mindset shown off to them. I would say 100%, meaning a lot of people's experiences come from experiences done to them, right? But the thing is, that might be a reason, but that's not an excuse, and you have to distinguish the two. So this ties into the idea of just don't be a mere reflection of what has been happened to you or what has been done to you. Don't become the evil in someone else's heart. And this, of course, transcends racism to a bunch of other topics, right? Sexism, all that stuff. When someone breaks your heart of a particular gender, Don't just, hate all men or hate all women from that standpoint. If you were molested as a child, don't grow up and molest someone. If you didn't have a father in your life when you were younger, overcome that and be a great father yourself. That's like overcome what has happened to you. So a lot of racist tendencies and assumptions and biases come from 1, 2, or 3 experiences with someone of a particular race, and then people generalize the whole group from there. So you really gotta fight that and just see the individual in people. So for example, if there's a white person and a black person, right? I'm not going to just assume the white person is smarter than the black person, and I'm not going to assume that the black person is tougher than the white person because they've been through more adversity, or maybe the white person lives a privileged life, right? Both are judgments about a person without even knowing anything about them. So you want to avoid that. And even if they're dressed differently. So I hear sometimes people say, oh, they were dressed a certain way, so that's why I made a judgment. It's like, why? How can you make any mental character trait evaluation of someone from anything on the outside? Evaluating someone based off their dress is not racism, but it's in the same sort of category, right? So like even if that white dude was in a suit and the black dude was in a t-shirt, I'm not going to assume that the black dude is tougher, and I'm not going to assume that the white dude is smart just because he's dressed up. I'm not going to do it. And this leads me to the one bias though that you can make about people, and that's from their behavior once you get to know them, right? So this ties into the Maya Angelou quote also. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. So like once you meet someone and you discover their character, then you can have biases from that standpoint. So for example, like I have biases against mean people, meaning I don't like to hang around mean people. Like I still value you as an individual, I'll hear you out, but I'm not gonna hang around you, you're not gonna really be my friend. I like to be around kind people, same thing with authenticity, all that stuff. So I have biases from that standpoint, from a character standpoint, but the distinction is you have to get to know someone. All internal character traits, toughness, intelligence, open-mindedness, you don't know that before you actually talk to someone. And I want to go a little deeper right now, like a sports analogy. Sometimes people in a joking way may just assume maybe the black basketball player can jump higher, or maybe is stronger or is mentally tougher than the white basketball player or something like that. And even in a joking way, like that's unproductive because it goes back to slavery mentality. Like you would have been, if you're saying that, the type of person to pick the black person to be the slave because you assume they were strong. Real talk. And it's like 99% of people nowadays, I think they just think, oh, I wouldn't have been the one to own slaves back in the day. But look, most people I encounter online and in person, at least 95%, they're followers. Like they don't think outside the box. They have no backbone to stand on when evaluating what's right or what's wrong. And some of y'all think you would have been the courageous ones back in the 1800s and pushed back on slavery of black people? Please spare me that. You wouldn't have been one of those people. All this talk about biases and judging other people, this ultimately just goes back to don't generalize people, right? So like when you're reflecting on your own experience of generalizing other people, I want you to not be tricked by some of the people out there promoting you to generalize people. So I'm talking about the anti-racist movement leaders specifically. So I've mentioned them in previous videos, but pretty much like a lot of the movement around racism nowadays is very simple-minded thinking. And this is very obvious because anytime someone of a particular race, whether it's a white person or a black person, when they say something outside of the norm or outside of what most people in their race think, then they're viewed negatively by the anti-racist group who want everyone to be the same in a particular race, right? So they almost generalize people and they want that to be the norm. So it's really backwards in my opinion. And I want to mention a children's book that I saw recently. It was called Same, Same, But Different. And it had a black child and a white child on the cover. So like the title itself, I agree with it, obviously. I mean, every human being is the same because we're all humans, but we're all different because we have complexities, we have our own identity and stuff. But the pushback I have is that the idea that two people are inherently different just because of their skin color is wrong, I believe. Because like that title is true no matter the two people on that cover. You have two black children on that cover. They are still the same but different. You have two white children. They are still the same but different. You might think like I'm kind of thinking too deeply about this, but I'm not. Because again, like a lot of the conversations around racism, specifically from the anti-racist movement, promote the idea that people of a particular race think the same, right? And this ties into all the misguided talks about diversity nowadays too. And for you individually, as you're trying not to be racist, not to assume, not to have biases, stay away from a lot of the crap that I'm seeing online and from people's mouth. So for example, a lot of people they frame diversity solely in the context of race or maybe gender. Where it's like if you have one black person, one white person, one Indian person, one Asian person in a room, then it's a diverse group. But that is just so backwards. And guess what? A lot of the times for companies like that, they actually all think the same. Like there's no diversity of thought. There's no diversity of background. Maybe they all are from the same location, right? So like really keep that in mind. And guess what? Those people who are in those quote unquote diverse environments that all think the same, those people are more likely to be racist. They are more likely to have biases, to assume, to stereotype. Why? Because they meet people of a particular race that all think the same. They all think one way. So therefore, they might only have 1, 2, or 3 experiences with someone of a particular race that maybe think differently, or maybe they all think the same. So they are one of those people I talked about earlier where they might judge people from that, right? Because they don't meet too many diverse people in a particular race. So they're more likely to be racist. They see things from a racial lens. So you really got to overcome that. So like in you checking yourself, you have to expose yourself to a wide array, a diverse array of everything, not just things on the outside, but experiences, backgrounds, political parties. So if you're in a town where like everyone is a farmer or something, like do research on people that might not be farmers, that have different experiences. If you're in a town that, everyone is Democrat or everyone is conservatives, think about the other side. See the viewpoints from the other side. And this will get you to reduce your racist tendencies because you'll see the diversity in other people that are of different races. And you're not looking at their skin color first, but the skin color comes after seeing who they are. So you just have to understand that the ultimate minority is the individual. And no, I don't want to go too off track, of course, because I went into a lot of this stuff in my part 2 video where I advocate for colorblindness. But the point is, like, don't be tricked up in all this anti-racist talk nowadays from these elites such as diangelo and the guy that wrote How to Be an Anti-Racist, because it's going to get you tricked up. Because guess what? A lot of those children that are reading these sort of books and the parents that are instilling this in, say, a 15-year-old's brain and that sort of thing, they're going to be the ones that have those racist tendencies growing up because they're taught to assume someone is privileged or disadvantaged from their skin color. They are taught to see things from a racial lens. They are taught to be paranoid about race, to see race when they see 2 people interact. They are taught to see diversity of race when they see 5 people. So they're going to be the ones to be racist growing up. So you have to stay away from all that. Like for my son, when he's 5, 6, 7, I don't want him to be paranoid about race. Like, live your life. There's too much to focus on in terms of your own self-development to be paranoid about every little thing going on. Like, I want him to stand up when someone is being discriminated against or being bullied, but don't be paranoid and read into intentions and meaning into things that don't exist. You don't want to do that. So when you're checking yourself, just do not be wrapped up in all the negative discussions that are unproductive out there on racism, and really think critically about everything you hear. So you really gotta be tough-minded to be as open-minded as you possibly can be, to fight all those racist tendencies, biases, assumptions, generalizations that you potentially could have, especially when some of society is encouraging you to have assumptions and biases. So you really just don't want to group people, and this ties into just recognizing your group pride in any category. So really reflect on that. So this can be an overlooked first sign of potential racist or biased tendencies that you may have. Not always, but it may be. So really reflect on it. So for example, like I went to school, University of Maryland undergrad, and I don't really feel pride about it. And throughout my life, I never got how people felt so much pride where they went to school. I think a part of it is wanting validation for going to school, but you really have to be conscious of all this. Like, are you just grateful that you went to that school and you had great experiences and you're prideful because of that, which is okay? Or are you prideful because you generally like to have an us versus them mentality? Because that can lead to you disliking the other side. And then this could spiral down into other areas of life where you generalize the other side. Then you generalize the other side in other areas of life like race and gender and political party and just all these different things, right? So you really want to avoid that us versus them mentality in anything, because that's the hallmark of a racist pretty much. It's not like, I'm not saying everyone who is prideful in their school or sports team is a racist, but I am saying that every racist is the type of person to be prideful from where they went to school or a sports team or that nature. So really be conscious and self-reflect on the group pride that you may or may not have. And it's basically like you have to see other people and yourself as free spirits, as individuals first. You know, like for me personally, like I see myself as that. I've always been a loner too. I've never kind of seek validation from other people. No one controls me or my thoughts. I think for myself. And I think that contributes, if I'm being honest, to a lot of the open-minded attitudes that I have. You know, so I really want you watching this video to keep that in mind. Like, you are a free spirit and other people are a free spirit. And you have to keep that in mind. Just because something happens to you doesn't mean you have to have that mentality onto someone else. You know, close your eyes, imagine different scenarios where biases may come into play. You know, really think critically about the conversations on racism nowadays and diversity. Do you agree with it or not? And ultimately, in trying to reduce the racism in the world, and if you really care about that, you gotta check yourself first. You gotta be honest with yourself first and eliminate and destroy the biases, racist tendencies, assumptions, and generalizations that you may have. Subscribe if you vibe.